Welcome back. We're now going to apply what we've learned about discounting and infinitely repeated games to the prisoner's dilemma game before us. So let's just make sure this is a prisoner's dilemma game. The other person is mean. You would rather be mean than nice. And if they're nice, you would rather be mean than nice. So in this game, you're always better off being mean. Mean is a dominant strategy. But if everyone is mean, it's worse than if everyone is nice. So this is definitely a prisoner's dilemma. And let's talk about playing this game multiple times. Recall from previous videos, if you played a prisoner's dilemma game a finite number of times, you're still going to be stuck in the prisoner's dilemma. You're always going to be mean every period because in the last period, if you know this is the last period you're playing, you want to be mean. And that means the second to last period you want to be mean, and so forth. Because the only reason in a repeated prisoner's dilemma game that you'd ever want to be nice this period is to convince the other person to be nice in future periods. But obviously, if you're in the last period, there are no future periods, so you might as well be mean. But it's possible if you're playing a prisoner's dilemma game an infinite number of times that you might be able to escape it because now there's no last period. So we're going to talk about one strategy for getting out of the prisoner's dilemma for the parties to reach this outcome in the infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma game. Now, when you play a game an infinite number of rounds, there are unfortunately an infinite number of strategies, right? My strategy could be always nice, always mean. I could be nice to you if you were nice to me 3 rounds ago, or I could be mean to you if you were nice to me in odd previous rounds. You know, there's a lot to do. We're not going to obviously cover an infinite number of strategies. In fact, we're really only going to consider 2 strategies to keep things simple. The first strategy is just you're always mean, right? That's a strategy. You're playing the game an infinite number of times. You could just, well, I'm going to be mean every round for all eternity. Okay, that is a possibility. Another strategy we're going to look at is grim. Now, grim is a punishment strategy, and it is the harshest possible punishment strategy. So with grim, you start out being nice to the other person. In round 0, you are nice. Could be taken advantage of. They could be mean to you. But with grim, you start out nice. You're always nice in the initial round. Remember, we start in round 0. You're always nice in round 0 with grim. And you stay nice unless the other person is mean to you. And once they're mean to you, you are mean to them for the rest of eternity. So think of it as a punishment strategy where you never, ever forgive. You're like, look, I'll trust you. I'll go into this game trusting you, and I'm going to play nice. Hopefully you'll play nice. But if there's ever a point in which you are mean to me, forget it. I am mean to you forever after you. There's no forgiveness. So start out trusting, but 0 forgiveness. So if the other person is mean to you, if you're playing grim and the other person is mean to you in round 13, well, you are mean to them starting in round 14 for all eternity, even if they're nice to you after that for all eternity. So grim is the worst possible punishment strategy. And we are going to investigate whether there's an equilibrium where both people play grim. Now, if both people are playing grim, and they stick to it, you escape the prisoner's dilemma. In this game, you would get 4 forever, right? If I'm grim and you're grim, my being grim is, well, I start out being nice and I keep being nice as long as you're nice. And if you're playing grim, you start out being nice and you keep being nice as long as I'm nice. That works, right? Grim, you can imagine 2 people with baseball bats. They're ready to start hitting the other person with a baseball bat. But they're like, well, I won't do anything if you don't do anything. The other person's like, well, I won't do anything if you don't do anything. And they keep holding the baseball bats, but no one does anything. They stick to it, fine, it works, they can escape. So everyone being grim is like, we'll start out being nice, and I will let you can take advantage of me for 1 round with grim, right? Because if I'm being grim, you're nice to me. In that round, you get the really good payoff, but then forever after, you're stuck with me being mean. So I want to investigate, and this is what all this is about. When is it that you can sustain a Grimm equilibrium? When will a Grimm equilibrium exist in this game? Now remember our concepts for equilibrium, it's no regret. So a Grimm equilibrium exists if, given that you're playing Grimm, I don't regret playing Grimm, and given that I'm playing Grimm, you don't regret playing Grimm. Now, I've made these games symmetrical, so we really only have to check it one way. So we basically say, if one person is playing Grimm, does the other person regret playing Grimm? And we're going to limit ourselves to two strategies, Grimm and always being mean. And essentially, right, if the other person's playing Grimm, you might as well either be Grimm yourself or be always mean. Because, right, if the other person's never going to forgive you, there's no point. And you're like, well, I'll be mean to you once, but then be nice occasionally. No, there's no point. So given, we're looking at whether there can be a Grimm equilibrium, it's not unreasonable just to limit ourselves to the two strategies of Grimm and always being mean. So again, no regret. So I have two choices, Grimm or always mean. And I'm going to ask, when do I not regret playing Grimm? And we're asking when can be in a Grimm equilibrium. So that means I don't regret playing Grimm if you are playing Grimm, and you don't regret playing Grimm if I play Grimm. So we have to ask ourselves, if I go along with this, what do I get? Well, in this game, if we're both Grimm, we both get the nice outcome forever. We get 4 forever, right? So we're always looking at discounted present value. That's 4 in this round, 0. Then I'm going to get 4 in the next round and the round after and so forth. As we showed in the last video, this whole thing converges to 4 times 1 over 1 minus delta. Now, I haven't told you what delta is, but, if in this game, if I know you're playing Grimm, I do not regret playing Grimm myself if, and my cat demands attention, so I do not regret playing Grimm myself if I get a higher payoff playing Grimm than something else, and this is what I get playing Grimm. Now, if you're playing Grimm and I don't, what do I get? Well, I can take advantage of you for one round, right? You're playing Grimm, and I'm going to play always mean. Well, I'm mean, you're playing Grimm, so initially you're nice. I get 6 in the first round. But then you're going to always be mean to me, so I'll get 2 forever after. So if you're Grimm and I try to take advantage of you by being always mean, I'll initially get 6, but then I'll get 2 forever after. So this is what I get. If you are Grimm and I'm like, I'm not going to be Grimm, I'm going to be always mean. All right. What is the discounted present value of that? Well, we kind of have to use that trick. We'll break this down a little bit. So this is 2, I kind of would like, because the delta 2, delta 1, 2, delta 2, I'd kind of like it if I had a 2, delta 0 term, because then I could use the formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the 6 delta to 0 to 4 delta 0 and 2 delta 0. So I'm just going to rewrite my discounted present value. Just the first term, I'll break that up into 4 delta 0 and 2 delta 0. Now I can use the geometric series, because I can say, this is just equal to 4 delta to 0 plus, and this whole thing right here is 2 times 1 over 1 minus delta. And then remember, anything to the 0 is 1, so 4 delta to the 0 is just 4. So if you're Grimm and I am always mean, this is what I get. So when do I not regret playing Grimm, given that you're a Grimm? Well, I don't regret playing Grimm, given that you're a Grimm, if what I would get by also playing Grimm, this, is higher than what I would get if I did something else. So I don't regret being a Grimm if you're a Grimm, if this here is greater than this. And then this is just pure algebra. So this, there's nothing deep here. So going from this line to delta greater than 1/2 is just pure algebra. So a Grimm equilibrium exists if delta is greater than 1/2 in this particular game, obviously, with different payoffs. We have different deltas. So now here's the big question. The Grimm equilibrium existed if delta is bigger than something. Why is that? Why did it come out that way, that the Grimm equilibrium can only exist if delta is bigger than something? and not if delta is smaller than something. So if this were class, I'd be asking you to discuss this with your neighbors, but it's not. So please pause the video, think about it. If you get this one, you kind of understand, I think, a lot of what we've been doing so far in this prisoner's dilemma, infinite stuff. And if you don't, well, maybe review. So obviously give you the answer in a second or so, but try to think about it. Why do you think this came down? Why, when we finished all this math and this algebra, why did it come down to the Grimm equilibrium exists if delta is bigger than something? Don't worry about the exact 1/2, but why was it bigger? All right, the exciting answer. If I'm playing Grimm and you betray me, you're not doing Grimm, you're doing always mean. You get something better right away, but then you suffer after, right? So we're trying to come up with an equilibrium. We're both playing Grimm, and you have the opportunity to betray me. If you betray me, you get a bonus this round, but you suffer in the future. That means the more future-oriented you are, the more you'll be willing to go along with this Grimm. And remember, the closer delta is to 1, as delta gets bigger, the more future-oriented you are. So it turned out the reason that we can sustain a Grimm equilibrium and escape the prisoner's dilemma if delta is bigger than something is because it requires people to be future-oriented. It requires people to be patient. So think about this in real life. You're working with people and you trust them. They can betray you. And they can get definite short-term benefits from betraying you. But then, you're not going to trust them again. You might try and hurt them. You might, tell on them or do whatever, and they'll suffer in the future. There's probably a lot of situations like that where somebody could definitely benefit from betraying you in the short term. But then they'll suffer in the long term. Well, the more future-oriented you are, the less likely you are to want to do that. And the more present-oriented you are, and that means the more delta is closer to 0, the more likely you are to go for the betrayal. If delta is really close to 0, you don't care that much about the future. You would say if delta is close to 0, you'd say, so I could go along and get 4 in period 0 right now, or I could get 6. Well, 6 is bigger than 4, and yeah, I lose in subsequent rounds, but I don't care that much about the future because I'm a low delta person. So this is actually a big, really important conclusion. Generally, if people are playing repeated prisoner's dilemma games and they're able to escape, they're able to get the nice equilibrium or the not betray each other equilibrium because of, basically it doesn't have to be Grimm, but, worry and punishment. You're like, well, I could betray you, I could be lazy, I could do something bad, I'll get a short-term benefit, I'll hurt other people, then they'll hurt me or won't cooperate with me as much. The more present-oriented you are, the more likely you are to betray, because that's often how it works, where we can generally get short-term benefits by being very selfish, but then we'll suffer in the long run, but not everyone cares that much about the long run. And of course, depending on the payoffs, it might be, even if you had a pretty high delta, maybe the short-term benefit of betrayal could be sufficiently high. So I'm going to do at least one more of these, and then there's a homework that relates to this, but I'll do another video. We'll work through this. Goodbye. Hope you're all keeping safe.